So the competition is going to be intense. Reading newspaper is essential. Whenever you are attempting your paper, be cautious that every question has the same marks. Whatever your ideas you are trying to express should be understood. Motivation that came was from the people that I was surrounded with. Analysis of the past year papers, because I realized that the themes from the past year papers tend to get repeated.
Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep Spotlight program. This program has been curated to help lakhs of aspirants who are preparing for the civil services examination or who are planning to start their journey. As we know, final results for civil services examination 2021 have been declared. 685 students have been recommended. But again, lakhs of students, they prepare for this exam. One of the toughest examination, the lengthiest examination of our country, and of course, the most prestigious examination. But at the same time, we have so many myths, rumors, how to prepare, what optional should be taken, what should be your parameters to select an optional, what should be your strategy for prelims exam, mains exam, and finally personality test. What books to refer to, how many hours you should study. To dispel those myths and rumors, we invite our toppers so that they can share their journey and experiences, and you actually get a focused direction with regards to the preparation of this examination. In that series, today, we have with us Ms. Diksha Joshi, All India rank 19. Welcome, Diksha.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep Spotlight program.
Thank you so much.
And first of all, congratulations
Thank you.
for clearing and getting this top rank.
Thank you.
Diksha, let us start with your journey. When did you get the first inkling towards civil services that this is your final destination? How it happened?
This would be described better but if I tell a little about my background. So the place that I come from, Pithoragarh, it's a border district, a hilly district in state of Uttarakhand.
Right.
So right from childhood, we have witnessed a lot of infrastructural issues, be in terms of the connectivity of the place, in terms of health or in terms of education. So there was always a thing that we would idealize the position of a district magistrate because the administration would be the first one to solve these issues. But also that I took up a science background and then medical came as an option. So I did my MBBS, but when I was doing my internship in 2018, so again, coming back to a government setup where I realized that there are a lot of challenges in the delivery of healthcare system, such as non-functional primary healthcare centers that would come to my notice or non-availability of doctors. So all of these issues, I realized that as a doctor, maybe I'll be able to contribute at an individual level, catering maybe to 50, 100 patients a day. But there are also certain administrative issues that needs to be addressed. So that came as a primary motivation when I started preparing for civil services exam.
Great. So to serve the humanity and uplift your infrastructure bottlenecks, particularly that came from your home state and home district.
Yes, it was a culmination of both the factors.
Great. Acha Diksha, this was your third attempt.
Yes.
Usually we find that students, they get demotivated after few failures. How did you preserve that motivation? You remain focused. And second thing, does it worth spending 3-4 years for this examination? So my question has two parts. So how did you, because the students, that would be very enlightening for the students, like you maintained it for 3-4 years. How did you keep that inner motivation? And second is, does it worth?
So how confident and happy that I seem and sound today, it wasn't the case when I failed my second attempt. Because when I took my first attempt at UPSC, it was very much expected that I would not clear because it was an underprepared attempt. But my second attempt, there was extreme amount of hard work that went into it. And I had never expected that I would not clear prelims. But it so happened that my score in the second attempt was lower than my first attempt. And that was when I was extremely demotivated, dejected as to, probably this exam is not meant for me and I should start going back to my postgraduate entrance and start preparing that. So I think the motivation that came was from the people that I was surrounded with, be it my parents, both my mother and my father at every point of time, my brother, the mentors who were around with me at that point of time. Those were the people who told me that, you have the caliber to do something. And at that point of time, when I was not able to see something that I have, the confidence that the people around me were showing, I think that was a source of motivation. And then I realized that probably I need to analyze what exactly went wrong. And whether I will be able to correct that thing or not. And that analysis was extremely important because I realized that probably my strategy was not right, or something that I was doing was not in terms of the demand of the exam. And I thought that if I correct this, maybe I will be able to clear this exam. So that is how I started. But again, there were innumerable days when I have cried, I have felt a little weak. But I think the consistency is something that you will always have to maintain while you are preparing for this exam, and stop cribbing about a lot of things. But if you have to do something, so keep doing that.
Good. So that if you have to do something, you keep doing that. Yes. So that would be the general, you can say, phrase for the upcoming students. Yes. Who like if I don't have that kind of supporting surrounding, my parents are not that much literate and educated. There are so many issues, financial burden, so many problems. Then how should I maintain that?
So I think here what is important is to go back to the motivation as to why did you want to come into this service. Because when you are competing for an exam like UPSC, you have to understand that the best of the minds are coming who are preparing for this exam. So the competition is going to be intense for obvious reasons. So at that point of time, one is the motivation. Second is to analyze as to what is going wrong that you are not able to clear and somebody else is able to. Be it with regard to the resources that you are using. It could be you are not analyzing your papers correctly. It could also be that you were not very calm on the day of the exam. So your attitude towards things. So that sort of a minute analysis when you do of everything, I think that is when you get into the correction mode. So for me, when I think a lot of motivational words end, is the objective assessment of what you are doing comes into play. Good. So that is something that I think aspirants can do.
Great. Diksha, you are topper of this examination. So were you studying for 20 plus hours a day? Because again, lots of students, they keep asking how many average number of hours one should study.
So I am also a doctor. I think studying 20 hours for 1 year at a stretch will not be also possible at an individual level, because it takes a lot of toll on your physical health as well. So on a daily basis, I think for 1 year of the preparations, 8 to 9 hours at maximum. But what is important is you do it every day. It should not happen that you are studying for 2 days and then taking a break for 4 days. Every day, if you put in those 8 to 9 hours at a stretch, it is helpful. Right before your prelims, mains or interview, depending upon your targets, I would say a month, you can always, before the exam, you can stretch it to 13 to 14 hours depending on how much you want to cover. But daily basis, I think 8 to 9 hours should suffice. So you also studied for 8 to 9 hours? This is what I maintained throughout.
Great. Now, you said it's all about consistency. It's not like you studied for 2 days and then you took a break. Then what about your involvement with social media? Do I need to uninstall WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, or how to use that?
So at a personal level, I have never used Facebook and Instagram till date. I have never had an account, so the option of deactivating was not there for me. But I have been a very active user on WhatsApp and Telegram also at a lot of times. So I think those were the two platforms that I was using.
Okay, so you don't have any account on?
No, till date I do not, and I have never used it as well.
Great. Now with regards to resources, we are having problem of plenty. We have lots of YouTube videos, lots of blogs, lots of Xerox materials, lots of suggestions, lots of websites. How did you select and focus on the most relevant resources for each paper? What was your strategy? Did you also face the problem of plenty?
So in the beginning, I think I did, because all of us, when we are new into this preparation, there's always this fear of missing out when we would want to collect a lot of material for ourselves. So, and also I think because of this, we become material collector in the process rather than clearing the exam. So what I think is the right strategy is maybe look at the videos or the blogs, or in fact, in today's time, we have a lot of Telegram channels being run by toppers or some reputed institutes who would recommend a set of certain standard books that are to be followed. For example, if we say in polity, there is Lakshmikant that is to be followed. In history, we are following the spectrum. So certain books like that, and the NCERTs, of course. So those standard books have to be referred invariably. And when you're referring to those standard books, keep solving some papers just to check, that whatever you are reading, is it in line with the demand of the exams, and also analyzing the past year papers. And the other advice that I would want to say is not to deviate very often from your sources. Once you have decided on your sources, take probably a month, especially if you are a beginner. In 1 month, visit a few topper videos, people who have background similar to yours or inclination similar to yours. And then once you're set into that, so stick to those resources unless there is, some situation where you're not getting marks at all or your marks are not improving. You would want better understanding. That is when for few subjects you can refer to additional material, but not for all subjects is what I think.
Okay. So first you do some homework.
Yes.
Select the most trusted and reliable material and stick to that.
Yes.
And what about newspaper? How many newspapers? And is it practically advisable to prepare notes out of newspapers?
So here there are two things. One, reading newspaper is essential. So I think any one newspaper, it could be The Hindu or the Indian Express, is something that you should follow throughout the year. Making notes out of it or not has to be one's personal choice, because I have struggled a lot with making notes. So if you are one of those kinds who cannot make notes, it would be advisable that you can refer to a monthly magazine that a lot of institutes in today's time provide. But reading newspaper is important because you always understand what is happening in the news, even out of those magazines, because they are always run by an institute. So they would want to put in some extra material. So you understand what is important or not, what was in the news, and how do I analyze something. So for example, Russia-Ukraine war was so much in news. So you understand that the organizations like Human Rights Commission that is being talked about is important. So if it is in a magazine, you read that. If you are able to make notes out of it, that is of course the best thing to do.
And coming back to your optional, it's a rare optional. Only specialists, they go for medical science.
Yes.
Or in general, what should be the criteria for a fresher to start or to select an optional?
Sir, I think to choose an optional subject, what is important is to have an interest in the subject or your inclination in the subject. But what we often notice in India, a lot of people, when they take up their graduation subjects, they take it because of a lot of external pressure, maybe parental pressure. You could not get into a particular course or something like that. So if your graduation subject is in alignment with your interest, I think that is the best subject to take up, because you have studied it for a few years, let's say 3, 4, whatever. So you should go with that. In case that's not the thing, so the other criteria to determine what a right subject would be is availability of resource, be it in terms of classroom material, in terms of test series, in terms of guidance. So for optionals where this is available in ample amount, I think that is what you should go with.
Good. And news or information that we get in newspaper is often not complete.
Yes.
So how did you, you can say, supplement that? How did you make it complete? Because suppose I started newspaper reading today, something is being talked about any particular topic. So newspaper deals with that particular topic of that day. So how to make it complete?
So I think here two things can be done. One is if you are not really able to understand, so a quick Google search wherein you type the topic, and the best thing would be type the topic and let's say write the UPSC behind it. So that is how you get information that is relevant to UPSC through filters. Other could be referring to any standard current affair magazine, because I think they have their own experts who are working in the field. So by analyzing the papers, they tend to provide you that sort of an information. So this would be helpful for beginners. In the course of the process, I think you also tend to develop your own ideas of how to generate that. So that way you can tweak it according to your convenience.
Great. Now, I'm planning to start my preparation. It's a 3-layered examination: prelims, mains, and personality test. What would be your suggestion? I'm junior to you. I'm novice. I'm a knave. I'm beginner. Should I focus on prelims? Should I work for mains? Or should I go take both the layers hand in hand? How to start with?
So I think the preparation is always integrated. You cannot isolate prelims and mains individually. What will differ is in the strategy, how you are solving your papers and approaching. So if I give an example, let's say of polity. So you start by reading Lakshmikant if you are an extreme beginner. So you take maybe 1.5 months to finish your book. Then practice some MCQ questions to see as to how do you approach your prelims.
Right.
And also practice some mains answer writing that could be from the past year papers, from the questions that are available online in different portals. So that is how you go about it. So I think the approach will differ a little, but I also think that if you have a good understanding of mains, it helps to improve your prelim score as well, because the prelims has become a lot conceptual. There is a lot of factual information, but you need to also understand the topic, and that understanding will come when your mains concepts are clear.
So I need to go through the basic book first.
Yes.
Then I start referring to question paper.
Yes.
And when should I start writing answers, mains answer? And because you have scored such a good marks in your mains examination written paper, how did you create that extraordinary piece of answer writing skills?
So to start mains answer writing, I think whenever you are done with a particular subject, you should start writing some answers. Those answers could be from the past year papers whose model answers are available in the market. It could also be from the topper copies that we get in different portals. So you take the question from there and you write your own answer without seeing their answer. And then you try and match, how much am I writing in relevance to what is being asked. Again, to be a little cautionate here in the sense that do not, idealize that topper answer, because they also are in a process of learning, so sometimes their answers could also not be appropriate. But just to get a sense of how an answer writing is done, that is, I think, how you should start. And the second thing,
Second is, you can say, how did you create?
Okay. So
how much practice is required?
Yes. So I think for this, ultimately you will have to join a test series, a program like that where you get a feedback from some experienced person. Especially this is, I think, very important for mains. For prelims, you can do a lot of analysis by yourself. But for mains, you always need an expert who is telling you whether you are writing right way or not, because we often cannot judge ourselves.
Right.
So that is one thing. And I think there is nothing as an extraordinary answer. What we often tend to miss is running after a lot of information. We do not write basic points in the answers. For example, a very common report that is mentioned in the economic survey, a data fact, we will think that everybody else is writing, so I should look for a new point there. But what examiner always demands is that certain standard points are always available. So before running after a fringe information, I think what is important is you realize that those 4 to 5 major points are always there in your answer. So that is how I think the answers become, at least you get a standard basic marks in those answers.
Beautiful. And what about current affairs, Diksha? It's an ocean.
Yes.
And students, they usually blame that if they are unable to clear prelims exam, they say that they could not prepare current affairs. What is the importance of current affairs? Is it at the cost of, or can it be at the cost of core subjects? Or if I have to generalize it, how to sum up and cover the challenge of ever daunting current affairs?
So I think current affairs can never be a substitute to your core subjects, because in my opinion, if you are very thorough with your static subjects, you will invariably clear your prelims exam, because any serious candidate would read those static subjects and a little bit of current affairs.
Right.
So if let's say you are able to solve 20 to 30 questions, you're able to get them correct out of your standard sources. So the rest of the questions can be managed from your current affairs section. Dealing about how to do the current affairs, I think here there are a few things that are important. One is to read the newspapers. Second, in my opinion, would be again to follow some standard magazine, which I have done. So that is what I generally advise. The length should be, in my opinion, 1.5 years, because now the UPSC is not asking very current questions, but more of contemporary questions.
Right.
So that 1.5 year of current affairs has to be prepared. And then again, when you're preparing it, you have to be careful as to what kind of questions UPSC is asking. So for that, I think the analysis of past year papers becomes important. So this is how you should go about preparing
Current
your current
affairs,
affairs.
right. And I was going through your mark sheet. In GS paper 1 and GS paper 3, you scored less than 100. If you go back, rewind yourself, reflect upon the day you were writing paper 1 and paper 3, what mistakes you think today you committed, and how not to repeat that mistake for the preparing aspirants?
So here I have 2 opinions. First, for paper 1, I definitely did a mistake in the sense that it was my first paper and the first mains paper that I was writing. So I started with the 10 marker answers, and in the flow of the exam, I started writing too much in the 10 marker answer, not realizing that I was running short of time. So in the 15 marker questions, especially in the last 2-3 questions, I barely got time to write points. So I could not express those answers in a better manner or somehow that I would have done it. So I think that is where I lost the marks. So an advice would be that whenever you are attempting your paper, be cautious that every question has the same marks. The 10 marker will have their 10 marks and the 15 will have their 15. So divide your time accordingly, which I tried to correct in the second paper. So in the same day, my score improved in the second paper. For paper 3, I think it was my weakest paper. So I am more or less satisfied with the marks that I got because I was always scared of paper 3.
Yes.
So I think the score that I've got in paper 3 is as per my expectations.
Great. Your essay marks are really good. 126. Now, Diksha, these days they are giving lots of quotations, abstract topics. How to capture that? How to create topic? And what is there any you can say yardstick objective criteria? How did you do this? Because how many quotations one can mug up, and it is difficult to write on abstract ideas. So how did you do that?
So here I think there are two sets of people. One are the people who read a lot. So they tend to have a better creative bent of mind. Their philosophical understanding is a little better. So for those people, I think it does not come as a big challenge. But for me, like I also came from a science background. So a lot of things goes in objective assessment. So I tried to use the same thing for my essays, even for philosophical topics. Whatever you have read for your GS papers, I think you should go down to extreme objective assessment of that. For example, this time we had this topic on how can the best practices be made better practices. So that was the topic that I attempted. In the first go, it sounds to be very philosophical, you know, but I think the questions, like when you start posing questions like what could be a best practice? How can it be made better? Why is it a best practice? So you always come up with 3-4 objective points. And when you are thinking on these questions, again, think in the terms of subjects that you have read. For example, what is a best practice that I read in polity? So I quoted the example of the Panchayati Raj system in India. Right. So I thought this is the best practice in India, but how can it be made better? So something that right now we are struggling with the concept of Sarpanch Pati, let's say. So a better practice would be a better implementation of this policy. Right. I did not read anything new for this. Whatever I had read, I just brainstormed that and tried to get to that point. Another example, like in economy, what I put up was that lockdown, when the COVID virus came, was the best practice. Everyone thought that this is the best practice to curb. But a better practice could have been a bio bubble that was created, where the mental health issues could have been tackled. So something like that. It was nothing new that I have read. But whatever I have read, I just need to go down to very objective assessment of that and then start writing. So I think this could be helpful for people who cannot write a lot. And in this way, you get more points also to write.
Right. Now, when you talk about writing, is it good to write using mind maps, flowcharts, write your answers in paragraphs or in points, use one pen or two pens? This is only because there are lots of rumors and myths. So how do you address that?
So here, I think writing in whatever style, be it paragraph, points, flowcharts, it has to come from person to person and also depending upon the demand of the question. Some questions can be better expressed in points and in flowcharts or maybe a diagrammatic representation. But you do not have to unnecessarily force those diagrams just because somebody has been telling you this. Because what is important is your paper, the answer that you have written should get communicated to the person who is reading it. Whatever your ideas you are trying to express should be understood. So if it is understood in a point manner, good. But if it is not, then I think the important is that you write the content that is to be written. It could be depending on whatever way you would want to present it. Right. And about using the pen, I do not know if people can find time to use two pens. If you are able to do it, it's good. But I always followed one pen. Yes. But underlining some important points could be a good idea.
Right. So you are from medical science, and lots of students, they come from medical science, engineering background. And now they have to study history, geography, polity, those subjects they have not studied for so many years. How did you get acclimatized with this, the problem of, you can say, anonymity or the problem of alienness?
So I think in the beginning it was difficult for me as well because the science background is completely different and after class 10th you suddenly leave reading these subjects. But what I want all the listeners also to understand is that you will not understand things in the first go. In the beginning there will always be problem, you know. In that point of time maybe you can refer to some free videos that are available, read a few more articles or topics on those particular issues. But you will always have to revise constantly because some things need to go into your muscle memory before you will be able to understand those things. So I think that is how people should do it.
Good. Now, lots of students are watching this conversation and they may decide after watching this, they should prepare or they should not. If they decide they have to prepare, what would be your message to lakhs of students who will be watching our conversation?
So I think here, whether to prepare or not, or if you want to opt for some other option, the best thing to do is to analyze what exactly went wrong. That is the same thing that I did for myself also. Analyze, right now I would say that because the prelims has been just a month back. So sit with your prelims paper and try and think that what were the subjects that you got the questions wrong from. So what I did was I made a sheet of paper, I wrote down polity, history, geography, current affairs, etc. And then I noted how many total questions came from a particular subject, how many did I attempt and how many did I get wrong. And then I also tried to think, why did I get particular questions wrong? Was it that I had not read it? If I had read, then maybe I had not understood that particular topic. Or was it there in my source or not that I was referring to? And after all of this, when you do this part, then you come to the point that whether, is there a scope of improvement, that something that you can change and you can do in your next attempt, which will fetch you good marks and help you clear. If you think that there is something, then I think you can always try for another attempt. If you think you have given your 100%, you did everything right, which is not possible, I think, because then you would have succeeded. So I think that is when maybe you can look for other options.
But your success story is very inspiring, because first 2 attempts you could not clear your prelims exam. It is not linear. Third attempt you are in the top of the list. What happened between second and third attempt that you cracked the secret of this examination?
So I think for me, prelims was a very big hurdle, because to get into that precise point of marking the MCQ questions, I think somehow I was not able to develop the knack for that. So this time I worked again for prelims part very intensively on analyzing my papers, as I have been saying very often. Whenever I was solving any sectional test or a full length test, I was going back as to see where am I getting a particular question wrong from and why. If I were to give an example, let's say I get a question wrong from the governor chapter. So I go back and try and see that whether I had not read that particular line. If I had not read it, then why did I not read it? Whether I have understood it or not. And what I used to do was, whenever I used to get a question wrong, I used to make a box or highlight that particular part and write a Q adjacent to that, indicating that it's a probable question. So the next time that I read it, I'm revising that particular thing also. So one was this, and I think the second thing was analysis of the past year papers, because I realized that the themes from the past year papers tend to get repeated. So relying too much on coaching would not be a good idea, but to analyze what UPSC is demanding. So go back to the past year papers and analyzing those. I think that is what helped me a lot.
Good. And any message you want to give?
So I think for the aspirants, what I would always say is that consistency is extremely important. In this exam, you will have to be a lot more patient than you generally think would demand in any other service. So here, 2 things: keep working hard, be consistent, and sometimes the success would not come in 1, 2, 3, or maybe more attempts. But I can tell you that being on the other side always will feel good. So trust that hard work that you are doing, and one day you'll surely succeed. My best wishes to everyone.
Thank you, Diksha. Thank you so very much. So this was a lovely and enlightening conversation with AIR 19, Miss Diksha Joshi. She talked about the importance of consistency. She talked about revision. She talked about interest should be of paramount importance while selecting your optional. She talked about 8 to 9 hours, more than enough, but it has to be consistent. And the most important part, come out of FOMO factor, fear of missing out. Don't keep expanding your resources. Do some homework, explore, or you can say decide on any particular subject, any particular book for one subject. Stick to it. Don't get deviated. So it was an enlightening conversation, and your preparation should be integrated. You should not be running behind, you can say prelims first, mains second, then I will work on personality test. It should be integrated one. Thank you so very much, Diksha. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.